The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it! Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It is good to be with you. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we are watching right now. A judge orders the release of a redacted version of the affidavit used to justify the search at Mar-a-Lago. The deadline for when the Justice Department has to comply with this order and what we could expect to see. Robert Costa joins us from West Palm Beach with the latest. Economists, Republicans, and even some Democrats are criticizing President Biden's student loan debt forgiveness plan. Why critics are against it, plus the impact it might have on the upcoming midterm elections. And a Ukrainian nuclear plant is temporarily cut off from a power grid because of fire damage. The plant has been occupied by Russian forces since the early days of the war. Ukraine alleges Moscow is holding the plant hostage, storing weapons there, and launching attacks from around it. And later this hour, Florida voters have chosen Charlie Crist as the Democratic gubernatorial nominee. The congressman joins us to discuss going up against Republican incumbent Ron DeSantis. Plus, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is fighting a subpoena to testify before a special grand jury investigating potential 2020 election interference. We take you to the Peach State for the latest. We begin tonight with a federal judge ordering the release of a redacted version of the affidavit used in the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. Now, according to the order, the document must be unsealed by noon Friday. The Department of Justice submitted the redactions for review earlier today. In the order, U.S. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhardt said the government, quote, met its burden of showing that its proposed redactions are narrowly tailored to serve the government's legitimate interest in the integrity of the ongoing investigation. The government has argued that this document should remain sealed. Meanwhile, media organizations, including CBS News, have pushed for its public release. For more on this, Robert Costa joins us now. Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. Robert, so I like to help the audience at a time like this because it doesn't follow every single turn of the screw the way we do. There was a search warrant executed at Mar-a-Lago. What justified that in the eyes of the magistrate judge, Bruce Reinhardt, was an affidavit. Now, there's been a request by media organizations and others to have that affidavit unsealed, a highly unusual circumstance at this stage of any investigation. Nevertheless, a judge has said, the same one, Bruce Reinhardt, that portions of that should be made public. What's your sense of things as they stand right now?
Major, good to be with you. Here's the scene in West Palm Beach, Florida. Judge Reinhardt has announced that a redacted affidavit will be released by noon Friday, and we are all waiting to see what's the extent of the redactions in this document. He's outlined in his order that there will be redactions when it comes to sources and methods and witnesses. There will be redactions when it comes to the strategy of the investigation. So we could be looking potentially at an affidavit that has a lot of black marks on it that doesn't tell us too much. But the scope and length of the affidavit could be interesting for those of us who are following this case. And there might be some more tidbits. Already tidbits have come out about this ongoing federal probe in reporting and letters from the National Archives to the Trump lawyers. This release of a redacted affidavit will be the latest chapter in trying to understand more about the foundational evidence that led to a search warrant of a former president's home just across the water here in Palm Beach, Florida.
And even if it is a heavily redacted document, as you said, there might be some tidbits of information. There might be things that the federal government lets known or to be known or let the judge know as it filed this affidavit. what's your gut sense, Bob, of what we're going to see here? Something that is large and juicy or small and incremental?
My sense, based on reading Judge Reinhardt's order a few days ago, demanding that the government produce their suggested redactions to this affidavit, is that this is a judge who wants something to be made public. He has noted that this is a historic situation, an unusual situation. He knows that affidavits are rarely, if ever, released at this point in an ongoing investigation. But because of high public interest in having a former president's home searched, he would like to see something out there. And so he put it on the government to come up with some ideas that wouldn't hurt their investigation in any way, but would still provide the public with a little bit more understanding. And so my sense is we could learn more about what's already been released from National Archives documents. We have known in the National Archives letters to the Trump lawyers that have been released that there was top secret material, classified material, that there was references to potential so-called special access programs, very sensitive intelligence, national security matters in these boxes that former President Trump brought with him from the White House residence down to his Florida estate after he left the White House. And so because of that knowledge about the investigation already being in the public domain, the Justice Department and the judge, in a collaboration in this decision here, could allow some of that to come out from the affidavit.
And Robert, one of the things that was said early on was this might have been a misunderstanding, that the former president was cooperative. But it seems to me, in my reading, that the body of evidence that has emerged, either from the National Archives or other reporting, yours and other journalists on this story, is that it's harder and harder to make a case that this was a misunderstanding or that the former president and his legal team were fully cooperative. Clearly, there was some substantive disagreement about the misunderstanding, the level of cooperation, and the Justice Department felt the FBI had to be brought in, and they brought that explanation and history through an affidavit to Bruce Reinhardt, this U.S. magistrate judge, and that's how we got to where we are. Fair assessment?
We're looking at a situation here, Major, where we cannot yet read what the intent was of former President Trump because we don't have all the documentation or the depositions from witnesses that the Justice Department has on its hands. As reporters, I often say we regretfully at times only carry notebooks and cameras and pens. We don't carry subpoenas with us. The Justice Department has that advantage when it conducts its own investigations. And so we're at a crossroads here where we're going to learn more from the affidavit, but it will ultimately be up to the court to decide, and a jury potentially, if this ever goes to trial, if it ever leads to an indictment, to decide whether former President Trump had criminal intent when he took boxes from his White House residence to his Florida estate without giving them to the National Archives for processing. Whether this rises ever to the level of an indictment, whether this ever rises to the level of a trial, we're nowhere near that at this point based on our understanding of this case. What we do know is that it's a very serious matter based on what the National Archives has outlined to Trump lawyers. That this was classified information, highly classified information in their view. And they also believe that former President Trump made a decision to hold on to it for a certain period of time, knowing that Pat Cipollone and others were told in the White House counsel's office to make sure it was processed by the National Archives. It's a complicated story, a lot of different paths to follow here, but we're trying to follow them all as this investigation continues to gain new information, all while other investigations are gaining traction in their own respective ways, whether it's the investigation of Trump's conduct in Georgia in the Fulton County grand jury investigation, or up in New York with the various investigations there, or on Capitol Hill.
And Robert, real quick, you talked to the Trump legal team. I talked to the Trump legal team. Would you say in the intervening 3 or 4 days, or maybe the last week, their level of anxiety has shifted at all?
There's a sense in Trump's inner circle, both his legal team, based on my reporting, I'm sure your reporting may back this up, that the former president was not acting in a criminal way when he took boxes to Florida. But as I said, we don't have the full scope of information about how he made that decision, who told him what to do and what not to do, and whether he knowingly acted against that counsel. And if he did act against counsel, whether that rises to the threshold of a crime being committed. But this is a federal investigation. This is not some kind of probe from the press. This is not some kind of question. This is an ongoing federal investigation dealing with a sealed affidavit, redactions being discussed with a federal judge. An FBI search was conducted. Federal agents had been to Mar-a-Lago before the search. So at this point, I hate to predict anything because we're just learning almost hour by hour a little bit more about how this case came together.
Robert Costa with us. Thanks so very much.
Thank you.
For more on this, and trust me, at a story of this magnitude, there's always room for more. I want to bring in Catherine Watson and Dan Meyer. Catherine is a White House reporter for CBSNews.com. Dan is a national security attorney and managing partner of Tully Rinke here in Washington. Catherine, starting with you. Attorneys for former President Trump have argued that some of this material seized by the FBI could and possibly should be subject to executive privilege. Now, you wrote about this on CBSNews.com. Does the former president have the right to hold some documents from the public?
Absolutely. Great question. So to dive into this a little bit, I want to distinguish a little bit between executive privilege and documents that might be classified, because I think it's easy for people to mix those things up because we're being thrown with so much information. So executive privilege, something that Trump's attorneys are trying to claim, is something that has to do with the president's maybe deliberative records. Maybe it was conversations with aides, notes to that effect, that former President Trump is now trying to say, you know, are privileged records that should not, that the National Archives should not be giving to the FBI. There are some complications with that, though, that argument, according to essentially federal statutes as well as experts I've spoken to. And what it comes down to is that a couple cases related to President Nixon's Watergate scandal, which we all, whether we were alive for that or not, remember, a couple of Supreme Court cases that came out of that essentially said that executive privilege is definitely not absolute, and that the president or a former president can't make claims of executive privilege in an attempt to keep those documents from another part of the executive branch, in this case being the FBI.
Very good. Now, Dan, based on your expertise, what kind of things are we to think about when it comes to a former president's capabilities to keep any of these documents, and especially those that have a classification of top secret and or higher?
Thank you. We're glad to be with you. So the first question that every judge will ask is, how is my decision going to affect the current or future president's ability to deliberate in the Oval Office? That's what many people are missing. The question here is not about Citizen Trump. The question's about how the release of those documents into a court, particularly to a court, will affect presidential decision-making. I think it's a slim argument. I don't think it'll pass the red face test with the judge. Going back to the FBI, that's returning the documents to the safest place they can be. So that really does protect presidential decision-making. And then we have long-standing precedents, in not only with the Nixon administration, but with the Clinton administration as well, in that the judiciary does have access to these documents as long as they can protect them. And our courts do have the ability to protect classified information. When you get to the classified information, there's even less of an argument that these should not be returned to the federal government. In fact, that's where the discussion starts about whether a crime has been committed under Title 18.
And Dan, I know we're a long way from this, but let's just play this out. If former President Trump, for these underlying issues, were to be indicted, and if he were to face trial, be convicted, would that absolutely block him from seeking the presidency again?
Well, under some of these arguments, you cannot run for elected office. The Reality Winners case is one, and she's even commented on this. Other people who've had this problem of removing federal property from federal premises have run into prison terms, and if you're in a felonious state, you can be barred from office. So there is that potential for damage to Citizen Trump as a candidate for a second term. What I would watch for, though, is if that starts to loom its head, many prosecutors, and certainly many within the FBI, could be tempted to draw out the investigation or draw out potential trial to move beyond an election. This does happen in Washington. The idea that you don't want to bring your administrative investigation or criminal investigation into politics because that could skew your finding. So that's where you'll see the real politics start, is if it looks like a serious case for prosecution, there could actually be more delay and we could have to go on with this for longer and longer.
Catherine Watson and Dan Meyer, thank you so very much. President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan has some, even in his own party, just a bit upset. What criticisms from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have about the president fulfilling what he says was a long-running campaign promise, and how all of this may or may not impact the midterms. Plus, Florida gubernatorial Democratic candidate Charlie Crist, he joins us next, and we'll talk to him about what can only be described as an uphill campaign against incumbent Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. You are streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Florida voters on Tuesday chose Congressman Charlie Crist as the Democratic nominee for governor. Now, you might recall that Crist was once the Republican governor of Florida, then he was an independent, now he's a Democrat, and he will go head-to-head against GOP Governor Ron DeSantis this fall. In his victory speech, Crist called DeSantis, quote, dangerous, unquote. Charlie Crist joins us now. Great to see you, Congressman. So, one thing I want to ask you, today's Gallup survey has President Biden at a 44% approval rating, the highest he's been in the Gallup survey for a year. Will you campaign happily and contentedly if President Biden comes to Florida?
Be delighted to, of course. He's a great man. He's a great president. He's done so many wonderful things of late. And, the latest example, making college more affordable for more Americans. I think that's a wonderful idea to forgive some debt up to $20,000 it'll be for some people. That's pretty outstanding. what he's done in relation to inflation. We've seen now 71 days consistently of the price of gas going down at the pump. That's wonderful to have that occurring. What he's done overseas as it relates to Ukraine. I wear this pin with the American flag and the Ukrainian flag every day. And, they're fighting for democracy over there. Presidents brought together NATO, the EU, and brought in 2 new members to North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's just tremendous. And this little country is fighting off Russia. And it's really something to watch. And I think the president is doing great. Love to campaign with him, of course.
Congressman, as you know, other Democrats are a bit more squeamish about that. What would you tell Democrats who are on the fence about having President Biden either come to their state or their district?
Well, I would embrace him. That's what I'm doing. I think he's wonderful. I know he's wonderful. I know him. He's a good, decent man. And, if you can have somebody like that at your side who happens to be the president, the most powerful man in the free world, are you kidding me? No, I look forward to President Biden being down in Florida. He left me a wonderful message yesterday that he's eager to do that, and I can't wait until we're able to schedule it. It'll be wonderful.
Congressman, you mentioned the president's student loan forgiveness executive order. Larry Summer, former Treasury Secretary of the Clinton administration, Jason Furman, an economic advisor to former President Obama, both have said this will cause inflation to go back up. You mentioned inflation and this. You don't see that happening.
No. Look, you know how expensive it is to go to college today in our country? It's absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous. And what's President Biden doing about it? He's giving students relief. Isn't that what a good public servant is supposed to do? Help people out in a time of need, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, the golden rule that I strive to live by? No, I don't think it's going to cause inflation. It's going to cost lower for students to be able to get a college degree. That's a wonderful thing. That's called great public service. That's called caring about.
Congressman, I want to ask you about what you said at your first press conference after securing the Democratic nomination. If I have this correctly, you said those who support Governor, meaning Governor DeSantis, should stay with him and vote for him. And I don't want your vote. If you have that hate in your heart, keep it there. Do you stand by those remarks?
Well, look, I'll take anybody's vote. But seriously, if we're honest with each other, if somebody's a staunch supporter of Governor DeSantis, the odds of them voting for me are pretty slim. But there are good moderate Republicans, though. And I hear from them every day, Major, and they're telling me, look, I'm a Republican, but I'm going to vote for you. And I am damn glad to get their vote. Every vote matters. Every vote is precious. And anybody who wants to vote for us in this campaign, I'm delighted to have the vote. And I look forward to it. I'm a uniter. I want to bring Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all of us together. We're all Floridians. We're all Americans. And do what's best for the Sunshine State. And that means lower the cost of living here. Have a governor that will actually fight property insurance companies and how they're gouging our people. Have a governor that respects women and would respect their right to choose and make their own decisions about their own body and their health. Have a governor that respects African-American voters and make sure that, if you have drop boxes in minority communities throughout the state of Florida, unlike what the governor has done. Governor DeSantis, that is, of course. I look forward to a lot of changes in the Sunshine State. People deserve better than what we're getting. We have a governor who's laser focused on running for president. I mean, let's be crystal clear about this. And what he's doing to try to achieve that Republican nomination is advocate for open carry for guns. We need to ban assault weapons. Florida's been really stung horribly by the gun issue. What happened in Parkland, what happened at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. And the governor wants to have open carry in our state. Is he out of his mind? I mean, that's insane. We had to ban assault weapons, have background checks that actually check backgrounds, and have red flag laws nationwide. I think that would help that issue and save a lot of people's lives.
Congressman, as you've heard Governor DeSantis describe it, he wants this campaign, at least in part, to be a referendum on COVID. He said he kept Florida free, kept businesses open, minimized restrictions, and you opposed him every step of the way. Do you believe COVID and how it's being viewed in the rear view will be central to this campaign?
I didn't oppose him every step of the way. Please don't mischaracterize.
That's his word. I'm just characterizing his phraseology.
Gotcha. My bad, Major. I'm sorry. No, well, what he did is he opened businesses. There's no question about it. He did what you described. And guess what happened on the flip side of that? 80,000 Floridians are dead. So there's a record for you. Now, what I think you can do is you can have businesses be open and you can practice safety at the same time. These issues are not mutually exclusive of one another. You can use your brain and listen to scientists and do what's right to protect people and open businesses in an appropriate fashion where you don't risk life. I mean, do we want to have safety first and make sure that we're taking care of our citizens, advocating that they get a vaccine because it makes sense, advocating that they wear a mask indoors? He didn't do any of that, none of it. And 80,000 people later, you know, that's pretty horrific. Over 6 million of my fellow Floridians have gotten this pandemic. And we don't yet know the terms of, you know, long COVID. You know, so I don't think his record on this is sterling. I don't think it's admirable. I think it's appalling. And I think that you don't have to be, you know, black or white on this thing. You can listen to science. You can appropriately open business and do what's right for all people and have a much better result than as many people that are now dead in the Sunshine State. It's shocking to me.
A conversation that we will continue with you. Congressman Charlie Crist, thanks so very much.
Thank you, Major. Great to be with you. Have a good evening.
President Biden's executive order on student debt relief could help up to 43 million Americans. $10,000 will be canceled for borrowers making less than $125,000. Mr. Biden has also extended the payment pause through this year. For more, I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, always great to see you. So there's been a lot of reaction to this, criticism from Republicans and even some moderate Democrats. What are they saying?
Well, in terms of Republicans, they argue that this is just going to once again pour more fuel on the fire of an already overheated, overinflated economy, and that this will continue to spur inflation potentially, given the billions of dollars that would likely be required to pay for a plan like this. And so that being said, they also argue that this is something potentially that could hurt other working families, people without college degrees, because in essence, it will ultimately be the taxpayers who have to foot the bill for this. In terms of moderate Democrats, many of them are arguing that this should be more targeted relief. So while they don't necessarily dispute the need for relief, they feel that this is too widespread and should be more targeted towards individuals who, in their view, really need this.
And Nicole, this dominated most of the questioning at today's White House briefing. How is the administration and those supportive Democrats defending this move?
Well, look, the White House and President Biden are unapologetic and believe that this is the right action and the right time to do this. And, you know, in their view, they believe that this will be something that is fiscally responsible and that this will help those who are most in need. You know, the president tweeted really calling out Republicans in particular, saying, look, you guys are the same ones who voted for these major tax cuts and tax reforms back in 2017 that in essence, you know, help the rich, help the wealthy, help these giant corporations. So, you know, why get upset at me for trying to help the middle class? And what's interesting is that the White House is really kind of taking this argument a step further and calling some Republicans out by name, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, among others, who they say have gotten loan forgiveness from the PPP program. You may remember during the pandemic, this was a program that kind of helped small businesses and companies stay afloat to continue to pay their workers, et cetera, during the pandemic. So they are literally calling out some Republicans name by name, tweet by tweet, saying, look, you know, you want to criticize our plan? Well, you got hundreds of thousands of dollars in loan forgiveness. So, you know, why are you coming at us?
And Nicole, for the benefit of our audience, you're on Capitol Hill every single day. Lots of lawmakers on the Democratic side, and particularly the progressive side of the party, have been pushing for this for months and months and months and months. Based on your conversations and interactions with them, what do they think the political impact of this decision will be now that it's made and now that it's going to be part of the midterm conversation?
Well, I think what's probably most notable, or what's interesting, kind of getting back to your original question about how some moderate Democrats are responding, what we are seeing is that particularly in some of these more competitive races, that's where we are seeing pushback from some of these Democratic candidates. For instance, like Tim Ryan, who currently is in the House, now running for the Senate in Ohio, who is kind of pushing back against this, saying that this could potentially hurt those without a college degree. And, you know, you have somebody, for instance, like Senator Cortez Mastow, who's running in Nevada in a very tight race, who also is saying that she doesn't necessarily agree with the president's decision on this and arguing that the relief should be more targeted. So we are seeing some of those, Democrats in more competitive races kind of pushing back against this as they kind of toe the line. You have somebody like Michael Bennet of Colorado saying, look, I think that the president should have made this more targeted. For instance, maybe target those Pell Grant recipients more so instead of just making this kind of a full on push and relief for lots of borrowers writ large. So that is some of the messaging that you're seeing behind this. But on the flip side of the coin, certainly many Democrats feel that this is a good message to put forth, particularly to young people, young voters who they will need come this election in November, just to reinforce the importance of really providing that type of relief to people who may be struggling right now.
Nicole Killian, we thank you. We will soon get a look at parts of the affidavit used to obtain a search warrant for former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Our Catherine Herridge joins us next with the latest in the legal battle to unseal the document justifying that raid. You are streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. Here's a look at some of our top stories. 243,000 Americans filed first-time jobless claims last week, 2,000 less than the week before. The number of people filing for first-time unemployment benefits has fallen for 2 consecutive weeks, and yes, that indicates a tight labor market. Plus, lawmakers Benny Thompson and Yvette Clarke are the latest to seek answers after a whistleblower made allegations against Twitter. Peter Zatko, Twitter's former head of security, alleges that the platform has been lying about information storage and security protocols. And a federal judge has ordered the Justice Department to publish a redacted version of the FBI affidavit used to justify the search at the Mar-a-Lago home of former President Trump. This decision comes hours after the department submitted the portions of the affidavit they wish to keep private as this investigation continues. For more, CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge is with me now. Catherine, you've read this order. What did the judge find?
Well, Major, the judge says in his order that he believes the FBI and Justice Department has found a way to thread the needle and keep some elements of the affidavit secret, and then also releasing other elements to the public. And the key phrase in the order is narrowly tailored redactions. That order reads in part, the government has met its burden of showing that its proposed redactions are narrowly tailored to serve the government's legitimate interest in the integrity of the ongoing investigation and are the least onerous alternatives to sealing the entire affidavit. And the reason that matters for context is that it was just about 10 days ago that the FBI and Justice Department argued to this court that if they blacked out or redacted the most sensitive investigative information, grand jury information, potential witnesses, kind of this roadmap to their investigation, they argued to the judge it would be a sea of black ink. And the judge effectively called them out on that claim and said, okay, you show me. And they've come back with what has, at least for now, satisfied the judge at finding that balance between what can remain secret and what is really in the public interest, given this was an unprecedented search of a former president's private residence.
Right, and you said the key phrase there, Catherine, unprecedented. And for that reason, media organizations, including CBS News, have been pushing for parts of this affidavit to be made public. And is it your expectation that because this has gone through this process that you just outlined, the public and media organizations of interest are likely to see less blacked out pages than they would have when this whole process began?
The agreement from the judge is that the affidavit will be partially unsealed. And tonight he seems, Major, satisfied with the proposed redactions or sections that are blacked out by the FBI and Justice Department. But it's not just the affidavit that's important here. Media organizations, including CBS News, have asked that a second set of records that were filed with the court today are also made public to the fullest extent, given the unprecedented nature of this search. And these briefing papers go to the legal thinking, the justification for what is blacked out. So kind of the internal thinking or machinations, if you will, of the FBI and Justice Department that justified what they felt had to be secret for investigative purposes, and then what they felt they could have some sort of margin for room on what could be public.
And Catherine, this might go to one of the things that those in the Trump camp have alleged, that this is all politics. And maybe what's going to be discerned here is the evidentiary basis that is not part of politics, maybe.
Okay, so, I've looked at affidavits for 2 decades and the kind of work that I've done. And I don't even want to maybe admit that, but that's what I've done. And they're very formulaic. Of course, this is going to feel different when we ultimately see it. But there's some key things to be looking out for, Major. Number one, a probable cause that a crime had been committed. Okay, so that goes to the legal theory of this FBI and Justice Department investigation. We know from other records that have been made public or unsealed that they're looking at 3 criminal statutes that have to do with the retention, mishandling, destruction of classified or sensitive information, and then also obstruction of a federal investigation. The second is, what was the probable cause that evidence that was relevant to this criminal investigation was at Mar-a-Lago? Like, how did they convince the judge of that? And then number 3 is the timing, right? Because we've seen these records from the National Archives. We know at the very least that there had been a back and forth between the archives and President Trump's legal team for months, if not more than a year. So what was the event, or what was the catalyst that caused the FBI and the Justice Department to conclude that they had to take what is one of the most extreme and invasive measures to gather this evidence for their case? And if there's one phrase that I'm going to be looking for, but I'm not so sure that we're going to see in this unsealed affidavit is special investigative techniques. And the reason I mention that is that the government argued that they wanted to protect these kinds of techniques. That can run a broad scope, everything from informants, potential witnesses, wiretaps, I mean, you name it. But that is a very important phrase to be watching for if it is unsealed, with a lot of it available to us to read.
Breaking it all down for us, as always, Catherine Herridge. We thank you.
You're welcome.
The war of words is heating up in the Pennsylvania Senate race with Election Day 75 days away. We take you to the Keystone State for the latest polling and reaction in the battle between Republican nominee Mehmet Oz and Democratic nominee John Fetterman. You are streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
A legal advisor to former President Donald Trump's 2020 campaign testified before a special grand jury today. Jenna Ellis was ordered by a judge in Colorado to travel to Georgia for this court appearance. The grand jury is looking into whether Mr. Trump and others illegally tried to influence the 2020 election in Georgia. Prosecutors are interested in Ellis's role in helping to coordinate hearings in Georgia and other states where false claims of election fraud were pushed. Joining me now is senior reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tamar Hallerman. Tamar, great to have you with us. What do we know about Jenna Ellis's testimony today?
We don't know a whole lot at this point. As you mentioned, Major, a judge in Colorado directed her to show up today to come testify We do know that Fulton prosecutors and the grand jury are interested in asking her about three main things. The first is her participation in some December 2020 hearings in front of the Georgia legislature, where her, Rudy Giuliani, and others connected with the Trump campaign echoed many conspiracy theories and falsehoods about the Georgia elections. It's where Rudy Giuliani played the famous edited tape of the State Farm Arena, where he talked about what he saw as a smoking gun for fraud. She also authored some legal memos for the Trump campaign that talked about appointing alternate Trump electors in swing states like Georgia. And they're also interested in asking her about any coordination between Trump campaign officials when it came to Georgia.
And Tamar, just to go back to the point you raised, the first and those three, this hearing where this tape was talked about as a smoking gun, to remind our audience, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation looked into that thoroughly, did it not?
It did, as well as our Secretary of State, and they very quickly issued some statements basically refuting everything that Rudy Giuliani and his team were saying. That there's no evidence of fraud. They looked into these allegations of so-called suitcases full of ballots, and none of that came to pass. Even the Justice Department looked into it. And still, Rudy Giuliani's subpoena notes that he continued to echo those falsehoods for weeks and months after. And so that certainly is something I'm sure the grand jury will be asking Ms. Ellis about.
And another aspect of this, Georgia's Republican governor, Brian Kemp, is fighting a subpoena to testify in this particular investigation. Has there been a judicial ruling on that today? And why does the Fulton County DA want to hear from the governor?
Sure. Well, there was a hearing just this morning in front of a Fulton County judge about that matter. He did not say how he was going to rule. He didn't really give a timeline about when he'd make that ruling, but I'm expecting that in the coming days. He usually acts pretty fast. Now, Governor Kemp was at the center of a pressure campaign, starting with President Donald Trump, who called him in the weeks after the 2020 elections, pressing him to convene a special session of the Georgia legislature in order to overturn Joe Biden's win. The governor, of course, pushed back. He said he didn't have the legal authority to do that. It would lead to a bunch of litigation. And still, the president continued to pressure him for weeks and months afterwards. And so we know the grand jury is interested in asking him about that, as well as the phone call that President Trump gave to Brad Raffensperger, who serves in his administration as well.
One other thing, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham continues to fight efforts to testify. What's the latest?
Sure. Well, a panel of judges in the federal appeals 11th Circuit has directed a lower level judge to look into whether there's kind of guidelines that can be set in terms of the questions that can be asked of Senator Graham. If you can't completely kill his subpoena, and this judge has already ruled that she does not want to do that, she does not think there's grounds for that, is there kind of a more limited way, guardrails that can be set in order to not run aground of things like legislative immunity and the Constitution's speech or debate clause.
Tamar Hallerman with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We thank you so much.
Anytime.
The major party candidates seeking to represent Pennsylvania in the United States Senate have spent this week sparring over vegetables. Yes. The Democratic nominee John Fetterman recently resurfaced a video of his GOP opponent, Dr. Mehmet Oz, complaining about the price of crudité. Yeah, I had to look it up too. In a statement to Insider this week, the Oz campaign said, quote, if John Fetterman had ever eaten a vegetable in his life, then maybe he wouldn't have had a major stroke. Fetterman recently returned to the campaign trail after suffering a stroke in mid-May. In response, Fetterman posted on his Twitter saying, quote, I know politics can be nasty, but even then, I could never imagine ridiculing someone for their health challenges. For more on all this, John Delano joins us now. He is the money and politics editor for our CBS station, KDKA in Pittsburgh. John, always great to see you. So according to a new Emerson poll just out today, Fetterman has a 4-point lead over Dr. Oz. Is that poll consistent with other data? And who would you say has the momentum at the present time?
Well, first, Major, it's always great to be with you. I always appreciate the chance to talk to you. Let me just say that poll is sort of an outlier. Most of the polls that we've seen, including the Franklin and Marshall poll that's just out today, showed a 13-point advantage for Fetterman over Oz. But the bottom line in Pennsylvania, as you know well, we have close elections, and everybody expects a single-digit race, whether it's the result of the Emerson poll or something close to that. Who knows? But it's going to be a very close race. And by the way, I had to look up crudité as well. You know, I may be Ivy League educated, but I never heard of the word crudité. It's veggie tray, man. At least in Pennsylvania, it's called a veggie tray. I don't know about your neck of the woods.
Yes, veggie tray works for me, too. So in the state's governor's race, Attorney General Josh Shapiro is facing Republican State Senator Doug Mastriano. What is the status there?
Well, that race, again, is one in which Shapiro is leading Mastriano. And again, it depends on which poll you look at. Most have shown Mastriano behind by double digits. The Emerson poll, I think, shows it closer. But the end result is that this will also be one of those single-digit races, simply because Pennsylvania is a single-digit state. Republicans tend to vote Republican. Democrats tend to vote Democrats. And then you've got about 1 million independents in between. And they're the ones that the folks are really vying for right now. Mastriano, of course, is a fascinating candidate because as a state senator in Pennsylvania, he led busloads down to the January 6th insurrection, although he himself says he did not take part in any of the violence. But he won't talk to any mainstream media at all. He has kicked reporters out of his vents. It's very difficult to get a hold of him. He won't do any debates on mainstream media. So the bottom line is that it's very, very difficult to have much of an engagement in a campaign like this.
And John, I want to drill down on that just for a second. You're an experienced and really capable local political reporter. And I wonder if this is going to work for Mastriano in the sense that, look, I've covered lots of campaigns in which the national press is derided. George Herbert Walker Bush derided the national press back in 1988 when he won the presidency against Michael Dukakis. It's not a new tactic at the national level. But local reporters have a different standing within their communities. And it seems to me what the Mastriano campaign is doing is keeping him out of the visibility in local markets all across Pennsylvania.
Well, you really make a good point, Major. I mean, the fact is, I've been doing this for 28 years. I've never covered a governor's race, frankly, or a U.S. Senate race, where the candidate is so unwilling to go on local media. It's one thing to really disparage the national press. They all do that. Donald Trump did that every time he came to Western Pennsylvania. I was there in the back and he'd point, but then he would single out certain stations, never the local stations at all. And indeed, you know, I got one-on-ones with President Trump because I know that he knew that local media is a much better conduit to the public, frankly, than national cable stations. So the bottom line is that Doug Mastriano, I think, just hurts himself by imposing rules. You know, he has this rule that if you're going to cover him at some of these more private events, you have to turn over your video. Well, what station is going to do that? I mean, some of this stuff just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No independent journalist is going to hand over video notes, anything like that. It's not going to happen. But in our era, John, of current politics where you like to be known by your enemies, I guess it fits into that particular category. John, we're going to talk to you much more as this race develops all throughout Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for your time.
Always great to be with you, Major. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and that means it's a very good time to remind you of this. You can stay up to date by downloading our CBS News app. You can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. Stay with us. You are streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital.
We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
President Biden has named a veteran of the Secret Service to be that agency's next director. Kim Cheadle has worked in various roles with the agency for 27 years. She will replace current director James Murray and will be the second woman to ever lead the Secret Service. The announcement comes as the agency faces scrutiny over deleted text messages related to January 6th. The Secret Service says it followed all procedures leading up to the event and is cooperating with various investigations into the Capitol Hill riot. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming free speech.
It's evident that there's a wave of censorship across the nation.
Angry partisan debate in schools.
College campuses have not been a place of intellectual diversity for the longest time now.
Are loud voices silencing a generation.
I don't feel comfortable speaking out.
I started to realize I wasn't even discussing stuff in class. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself.
Are the kids all right? Free speech. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carter Evans coming to you from our Los Angeles bureau. Thanks for joining us. Here's a look at the top stories we're following right now. Well, we're about to get a look at the redacted affidavit used to justify the search of former President Trump's Florida home, and we'll look ahead at what's coming up in the investigation.